Welcome back to Inside Health Education. This is your host, Enrique Halso, the Associate Director of the Texas Health Education Service at the TMDSAS office in Austin, Texas. On this podcast, we've discussed several aspects of the application pretty vaguely. We've talked to advisors, we've talked to admissions deans about how the application works and the things that they're looking for, but we've never really quite done too much of a workshop into what it is that you should be doing as an applicant in order to prepare for the application. And that is why I'm so excited to welcome Liz Feezor today. Liz, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I am a copywriter, speaker, and storyteller. I come from a corporate background, and now what I do is basically consider me a ghostwriter for people's professional brands. I work with individuals helping them write their bios, both on LinkedIn and more long-form needs, people who need to submit things to conferences and third-party application needs. And then a big part of what I do is also website copy for solopreneurs and people who have small businesses, people whose business is basically an expression of who they are as a person and as a human. I have a master's degree in health science. So from 2007 to 2009, I worked full time in the employee benefits industry. So kind of a health adjacent industry, more the insurance and payment side of things. But yeah, so I've applied for graduate level programs in this area and have since completed hundreds of job applications and been on tons of interviews and been rejected from a ton. Like, I have a lot of experience in the application and personal storytelling arena, I guess. But yeah, so I can empathize with anybody who's going through this application process.
Great. And that gives you some street cred with our pre-health students.
Hey, any kind of cred helps, right?
And it was so amazing and eye-opening to me that I thought it would be a great idea to bring her on the podcast so that she could share some of those exercises and some of those questions that she presented on personal reflection and apply those back to how you as a pre-health student are able to bring those ideas into the application itself and maybe even into the personal characteristics essays or some of the other essays in the TMDSAS and other application services. So before I hand over the reins to you, Liz, I just want to reiterate that there are several resources available for students out there who are writing their essays in preparation for the entry year 2021 application. The AAMC has published a article that lists out 7 tips for writing your essay, which includes things like, taking your time, make sure that you include details that better explain your situation, show what it is that you're trying to explain and don't tell, stay on topic, things like that. I'll include a link to that. And I also want to reiterate that we really emphasize those core competencies and characteristics that all of the schools have been promoting. And I think we're going to hear quite a few of those coming out when Liz starts giving us some questions to reflect on. So with all that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and hand over the reins and let you take it from here, Liz.
Cool. Well, thanks. And I really appreciate you saying nice things about the session that I did at Austin Design Week. It's one of the things that I really love to do is just get in front of a group of people and get people thinking differently about what they do and why they do it. Just getting people thinking about the words that they use to describe themselves and their work and using kind of these different exercises that I like to go through and remind folks of to take a little bit of a step backwards when it comes to your work and your life. It's very difficult for us when we're in the thick of it as students and as professionals to take a step back and be objective on the work that we do and the lives that we have. It's hard because we're living them right now. And so right. It's hard to do that. And so some of the exercises that I have people do during my workshops and when I teach people about bios, it's intended to get people thinking differently about the words that they use for themselves and maybe even think a little bit deeper about the reason why you're doing what you do in the first place. I think now is a good time. So when Enrique, you came to that session, that was back at the beginning of November. And as we know, a lot of things have changed since then. So we're recording this. Today's March 27th. We are 2 weeks into what is essentially a quarantine where everybody's staying at home.
Right.
We have a lot of time to sit and ruminate, which can be a great thing. It can be it depends, I guess, on your disposition. But anyway, I think now is a great time for us to really look inward at ourselves and do a little bit of investigation with why we're doing what we're doing. So one of the exercises that I love to, or a concept that I like to lead a lot of my talks with, is this concept of Ikigai. And it's a Japanese phrase that basically means a reason for being or a reason for doing. All these other languages other than English have these wonderful words that describe these like lofty, beautiful, esoteric concepts that just don't exist in English, unfortunately. But in Japanese, Ikigai represents these 4 key areas that intersect. So if you're picturing this, if you're visualizing this, I'm picturing like 2 Venn diagrams kind of on top of themselves, wherein the 4 circles kind of come together at one point, and that's the Ikigai. And the 4 areas that we're looking at are what you love, what the world needs, what you're good at, and then what you can be paid for. So when you're looking at the concept of Ikigai through the lens of professional life and work and employment, when you get closer to the intersection of these things, it really draws you closer to the work that means something to you, and that is a reflection of your beliefs and who you are and all these great things. What I think is interesting about healthcare, just as a field, as an industry, whatever you want to call it, is a lot of people that I talk to in that field, it's really an expression of their personal beliefs and what they love and what they can get paid for. It really is a strong expression of that concept, the confluence of all of these things coming together to really represent something that you do for work that is truly an expression of who you are and what you believe. It's interesting that now in healthcare, we're seeing all these conversations that are coming out of this time that we're in, where we're all quarantined at home. It's a health crisis that we're going through right now. So we're discovering that really leadership and value are huge in healthcare. Healthcare is tremendously valuable, and that's really something that's come to the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now. And being in healthcare, to a lot of people, especially like people like me on the outside who are looking at all of this unfold, looking at people literally putting their lives on the line, that's leadership to me. So getting people and getting ourselves thinking differently about these big concepts like value and leadership, I think, and combined with us looking inward a little bit as we have this extra time, I think it's a great time to really think about these things and think about your why. And that's going to lead great places for when you're writing an essay about why you want to go to the next step in healthcare.
Right. I should have a little bell every time you mention one of the core competencies of the selflessness. You're talking about altruism, and those
good.
are key
Unintentionally on topic. I love it.
Already defined that they're looking for in application. The topic of Ikigai, as you mentioned, is really exactly what you mentioned in that for pre-health students, what they're good at, what the world needs of them, what they can make money with, and all of that intersects right within that realm of becoming a healthcare provider. And so I think that when we're looking at writing an essay for an application, that's exactly what the schools want to see. They want to see that the entire journey of a student aligns toward that one goal. And so as you're looking through the application, we have a section in the application where students have to list all of their activities since they graduated from high school. They have to list all of the healthcare exposure that they've gone through. They have to list their volunteer experiences, all of that with the knowledge that all of that comes to the intersection essentially of Ikigai, that it's all leading to this one place. I think that's a fantastic point that you're bringing up.
Good. And I'm glad that it seems to really get people thinking along different lines when they're thinking about writing about themselves, because writing about yourself is just inherently awkward for most people that I talk to. And a big part of what I do is, as I mentioned, ghostwrite for other people, basically. Listen to their stories and kind of inhabit that and figure out a way to tell their story that makes the reader the hero of that story, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's really the core of when you're writing a bio, and particularly with an essay like this for an application, where it's part informational and it's part persuasive. It's easy for us to forget, especially people who are biology majors, pre-med, people who are data driven and who think logically along those lines with the data. It's easy to forget that when we present data within the context of a story or a narrative, that data becomes easier for our brains to digest. It's actually like it takes our brains fewer calories to process a story than it does to process data. So when we throw data points at people, this is why they say don't put a bunch of bullet points on a PowerPoint presentation if you're giving a talk and really want to motivate people or leave them with one or two salient points. Throwing data points on bullets is not the way to do it. So if you can figure out how to translate your data points into a story that essentially makes the reader, or in this case, the panel of people who are going to be reviewing applications, employers, we want to make them the hero of the story. So they are the healthcare leaders, the employers, the schools, the people who are training other people and employing other people in this field, because they are the visible ones. So what types of people do they want under their employ and under their leadership? The better you can illuminate that, I think the better your essay is going to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned the hero's journey a bit right now. You're kind of referring to it. Would you mind walking us through that? Because I think that has the perfect application to the writing the essays for pre-health students.
Sure. Well, I won't get super into all the details. So what we're talking about is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. It's a very common way of illustrating a story arc. So the hero's journey from Campbell, it's multiple points along this basically cycle of a hero going out. The world is presented as it is before there are obstacles presented, and all of a sudden the world changes. There's a new normal. So then the hero has to go through all these obstacles and do some changing and introspection to fight the battles, so that in Act 3, we can come out with lessons learned, the new normal, save the princess, whatever the end of the story is. But it's basically just a common way of expressing the moral and action of a story. The hero's journey is kind of the complicated way. 3-act structure, that's a much more simple way. We have world in Act 1, conflict in Act 2, resolution in Act 3. So remembering that arc and how to present data and information within a story arc like that is another good way to think about it.
It's really interesting because I attend a lot of conferences with advisors for health professions, and they have the exact same points to make about writing an essay. And it's that we have different models that we share that talk about attributes and characteristics and how those come into play throughout your application, how they've affected your life, and what that means to you. And we use these in terms of holistic review of an application. So, it's really interesting that you're bringing these up in terms of, how you see the world, the conflict, and the resolution for those. Those 3 points are actually really great for our students in every piece of writing that they have to do on the essays, on the application, rather. For example, in the most meaningful experiences or activities that you have in the application, you have a certain amount of words to identify 3 activities that were most meaningful to you and why they're the most meaningful to you. So there you have the opportunity to talk about the world, the conflict, and the resolution, meaning how you encountered that experience, what it meant to you, and what it means to you in terms of your journey toward becoming a healthcare provider. And you can use that exact same structure for every other essay. We're talking about how your identification as a non-traditional student comes into play into your application when we're looking at some of the essay prompts that we have in the application. For example, the personal essay, that asks you to explain your motivation to seek a career in medicine, and to include the value of your experiences that prepared you to become a physician. This is the exact outline that you're laying out here for all of our students to follow.
Great. Well, I'm again glad to be unintentionally on topic. Glad we're thinking along the same lines here.
Yeah.
No, that's absolutely right. An essay and an application, it's combined with the time that we're in now where we're all learning a new normal for what it means to work and what connection means. This is a great opportunity to look inward, to investigate your why behind going into healthcare and asking yourself, where did that impulse come from? Is it a long-time interest in science? Is it about caring for people? Is it coming from a specific place or time in your life, something in your past, a connection to a healthcare professional, or experience with your own health or your family's health? Everybody has a different story for how they came about where they are in their life. It's fascinating to me. I work with clients that are in all sorts of different industries and fields, and I've worked with people who even have the same job title, but the way they came about that and their personal experiences, their background, their education, no two paths are ever the same.
Right.
And that's what's so brilliant and beautiful about each of us as individuals. So I think the best that you can illuminate that, and really what makes your experience and your ambition and those areas of your Ikigai that we talked about all tie together. How does that make you the perfect fit for being a leader in X field?
Yeah, and that really highlights, connecting to the human experience and how you fit into it, which rings another bell for another core competency that we're highlighting there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, awesome. So, moving forward from here, would you happen to have any guidelines or questions that you want students to consider in figuring out how to express how they found their Ikigai?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of just word and thinking exercises that you can go through, one of which I think you went through in the workshop that we did back at Austin Design Week. But figuring out a way to describe what you do without using your job title. So, for example, without using the words physician or doctor or whatever the title is that you're ultimately working towards, what does that person do? How would you describe that using action words, using powerful action verbs? Do you empower people? Do you help people? Do you lead people to better lives with what you do? Just going through these word exercises with how we talk about ourselves and our work really helps unlock these inner stories and connections that you can make within your mind creatively that you may not have thought about before within the context of your own story, which is really what these are intended to do. So thinking about and talking about your life and your work just in different words and actually writing it down, I've personally found that to be tremendously helpful when I have an assignment to do or something I'm doing for a client. Just getting it out on paper, or sometimes like we're doing right now, just talking it out, where you're fairly objective on my story and I'm objective on yours. It's valuable to talk these things out and to get it out on paper.
Yeah, following that discussion, I actually came up with my own personal mission statement for the podcast. Is to demystify the admissions process to professional school for applicants and for advisors. And so it really gave us a targeted set of goals to achieve through the podcast. And so actually, through the development of that, we've been able to rebrand ourselves as Insight Health Education, because previously we were a TMDSES podcast. But now as Insight Health Education, we're able to explore different aspects of the application, but also aspects of the pre-med experience, pre-dental experience, pre-veterinary experience, and really address some of the issues that the professional schools always recommend. For example, we just did an episode on journaling. Everybody talks about how great journaling is, but nobody had ever talked about what does step one of journaling look like. So that's what we covered in that episode of the podcast. And so that was really helpful for me. It's probably not the best mission statement that I could have come up with, but it definitely gave us some direction that caused a full, tidal wave of changes that I believe are for the
That's
best.
fantastic, because that's really the point of going through an exercise like this. None of us are static. Our lives and our experiences are always changing. So when we get closer to what that Ikigai looks like, it informs the work that we do and the people that we're working with and the people whose lives we're touching. So I think that's great. I mean, now it's very clear in your mission that you're here to empower people and provide content that is really of great use to people who need it. The closer that you're able to get to what that is and who you're serving, the better work you're going to do. So I think that's great.
Awesome. So I think we're starting to wind down here, but I wanted to offer you any opportunity to share something else that you kind of want to leave our listeners with.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm a writer here based in Austin, Texas. And when I was thinking about, and when Enrique asked me, what service or information or what's something that you could provide the best, I think consulting, which I do on an hourly basis, is probably something that's going to be the most beneficial to anybody listening to this podcast. Like I said, just having somebody who's objective on your story and asking the right questions to tease out what the core message or the core themes of your story actually are, so that writing that out within an application response or an essay or a bio about yourself, it becomes less nebulous and a lot more clear when you've talked to somebody about it. It's just saying the words out loud. I can't tell you how many people I talk to are just like, oh my gosh, that's it. And I'm like, you said that. Those are the words that you just came out of your mouth. It's just getting somebody objective to ask questions that you might not necessarily think to ask about yourself is really the key. So,
we're happy to include your contact information in the description of this episode so that our listeners can get a hold of you. I do know I come across a lot of applicants who need an extra pair of eyes on their essays, who need some feedback on figuring out how to write their essays. And unfortunately, that's not a service that we can provide through TMDSAS. A lot of students have access to a pre-health advisor and a writing center, but we pretty much have a large population of students who don't have access to either of those as well. And so I do encourage you all to reach out to Liz to see if one of her services is able to fit in with what you need in order to prepare for the application.
Thank you. And thanks so much for the opportunity to come on. This was great.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. And that's pretty much all we had to cover. But again, thank you so much. These are some really amazing takeaways for our students. And I really hope that they'll take advantage of having you on their side of the, let's see, the sports analogy. I really hope they'll take
on their side of the bench. I can't think of a.
I really hope that the students will take advantage of having you in their corner as we come on to the new EY 2021 application and facing some uncertainties here. So thank you again, Liz.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Inside Health Education. Again, we urge you to continue the conversation in our online communities. At Facebook, we are the TMDSAS Non-Traditional Applicants Group for any non-traditional students. And we also have the TMDSAS Hub available to any TMDSAS applicant. On behalf of TMDSAS and the Texas Health Education Service, we wish all of our applicants all the best of luck. And we hope that these tools are going to make you shine brighter in your application. That's all for today. We'll talk to you later.
This is MedEd Media.